Hello, my name is Megan, and I'm 32 years old. If you're hearing my story today, I want you to know it's not just about what happened to me. It's about what shaped me, broke me, rebuilt me, and taught me what real strength actually looks like. People often see the uniform first. They see the badges, the discipline, the confidence, and they assume my life has always been put together, steady, and sharp. But the truth is, long before I became a soldier in the United States Army, I was just a girl trying to survive the storms inside her own home. I was born and raised in North Carolina, in a small peaceful neighborhood where the mornings smelled like pine and the evenings felt soft with the sound of crickets. My parents, Robert and Marie, were the kind of couple who made love look effortless. My mother was the warm light in every room she entered. She wasn't just kind, she was the kind of gentle that made you feel safe just by sitting beside her. My father, Robert, was steady, hardworking, the kind of man who believed in discipline but never forgot tenderness. Together, they made our house feel like the safest place in the world. Growing up, I was a quiet kid, always observing, always listening. My mother used to say that I didn't need to talk much because my eyes spoke louder than my mouth ever could. She encouraged me to be strong, independent, and brave. Maybe she saw something in me that I couldn't see back then. Maybe she somehow knew the storms I would have to survive later in life. The first real storm of my life hit when I was 16. My mother passed away suddenly. One day she was laughing with me in the kitchen while baking cookies, and the next day she was gone. It felt like someone had taken a knife and cut my world into two pieces, the life before her death and everything after. Nothing prepares you for a pain like that. Nothing prepares a daughter to live in a house where her mother's laughter no longer echoes. My father tried to stay strong, but losing Marie shattered him in ways I didn't understand then. He spent nights staring at the empty chair at the dinner table. He stopped humming while making coffee in the mornings. And though he loved me, I could see the heaviness in his eyes, a weight he couldn't put down. I did everything I could to make things easier for him, but I was still a teenager. I didn't know how to save him from something I couldn't even save myself from. When I turned 18, something inside me shifted. I wanted direction, purpose, a place where I could build myself again. So I joined the U.S. Army, and that decision changed the entire trajectory of my life. I still remember the first day of basic training, standing in formation, the sun hitting my face, the drill sergeant's voice cutting through the air like lightning. I was terrified, unsure, still carrying the grief of losing my mother. But somewhere in that chaos, I found clarity. I found strength I didn't know lived inside me. For the first time since my mother's death, I felt alive. The Army taught me discipline, how to push through fear, how to stand tall even when your legs are shaking, how to lead even when your own voice is trembling. It taught me resilience. It gave me a family again, brothers and sisters in uniform who would stand with me through anything.
People respected me.
They valued me. They saw me. And every time I put on that uniform, I felt like I was honoring my mother. Marie had always believed I was born to do something strong, something meaningful. And in the Army, I felt like I was becoming the woman she knew I could be. But life isn't simple. Just because you learn to be strong outside doesn't mean home becomes any easier. My father, after years of loneliness, remarried. And while I wanted to be happy for him, because he deserved companionship, I didn't realize then that this new chapter would bring challenges I never expected. At that time, I didn't know that the girl who could lead a team under pressure would soon crumble inside her own living room. I didn't know that the discipline and honor I carried in uniform would mean nothing in the eyes of people who barely knew me. I didn't know that the biggest battle of my life wasn't going to happen on a military base, but inside my own home. If only I had known what was waiting ahead, maybe I would have prepared myself differently. But sometimes life doesn't give you warnings. Sometimes it just throws you into the fire and expects you to walk out stronger. When my father told me he was thinking about getting remarried, I remember forcing myself to smile even though something inside me tightened. I wanted him to be happy. God knows he deserved it after losing my mother, but a part of me feared what this change would bring. I was still in the Army at the time, coming home only on weekends or holidays, and every time I visited, I could see the loneliness sitting in his eyes like a permanent shadow. So when he said her name, Brenda, I told him I was happy for him. I told him he deserved companionship. I told him I supported him. And at that moment, I truly meant it. The first time I met Brenda, she seemed polite, almost overly sweet in a rehearsed sort of way. She talked too much and listened too little, but I tried to ignore that. I wanted her to feel welcomed. She smiled at my uniform, complimented my discipline, and called me such a strong girl. But something about her smile never reached her eyes. Still, I convinced myself I was imagining it. My father looked happier than he had in years, and that was enough for me, at least at the start. Then I met her daughter, Olivia. She was around 20 at the time, pretty, confident, and carrying the kind of attitude that instantly filled a room. From the moment she walked in, she looked at me like I was competition, not family. She glanced at my uniform, raised an eyebrow, and said, "So you're like a real soldier?" Not curious, not impressed, just dismissive. I laughed politely and said yes, but inside, something pinched. First impressions matter, and hers felt like a cold handshake on a winter morning. Things changed quickly after Brenda and Olivia officially moved in. In the beginning, they pretended everything was smooth. Brenda cooked dinner with an exaggerated warmth, constantly telling Dad how lucky he was to have such a helpful daughter in Megan. But every time Dad left the room, the tone shifted. Brenda's voice sharpened. Her eyes hardened. Her sweetness cracked into something else, something calculating, something territorial. I wasn't her daughter. I was an obstacle. Olivia, on the other hand, didn't bother hiding her feelings at all. She made little comments in passing. "Must be nice wearing a uniform so people think you're important. You're never home. So why does Dad keep calling this your room? Army people act tough, but are always dramatic." At first, I ignored everything. I reminded myself that grief changes people, that blending families takes time, that patience is a form of strength, too. But slowly, I began to notice patterns. Dad stopped asking me how I was doing.
He stopped talking about Mom.
He started repeating Brenda's opinions like they were his own. And worst of all, he started seeing me through their perspective, as someone who should adjust, compromise, give up space, be understanding. I tried. God knows I tried. Every time I came home from base, I brought gifts, helped around the house, cooked dinner, and made sure Brenda's never felt compared to my mother. But no amount of kindness could change the fact that Brenda had found a convenient way to reshape her new world. Dad was her husband. Olivia was her priority. And I was just the stepdaughter who happened to wear a uniform she secretly resented. But the real shift happened when finances became an issue, something Brenda and Olivia blamed on rising costs and unexpected bills. It wasn't long before responsibilities started landing in my lap. And in the name of family, I took them on without complaint. Little did I know, this blind generosity would become the very weapon they used against me. I still remember the day Olivia came home from her college orientation, tossing her backpack onto the couch like a spoiled celebrity making an entrance. She looked stressed, more stressed than usual, and Brenda immediately rushed to her like she was running triage in an emergency room. "What happened, sweetheart?" Brenda asked, brushing Olivia's hair back dramatically. Olivia sighed loudly. "They increased the tuition again, and they want the semester payment up front. Mom, we don't have that kind of money." I watched the exchange quietly from the hallway. Brenda's face fell in that exaggerated way she did whenever she wanted sympathy. "Your father and I are already stretched thin. We'll figure something out," she said, but her voice shook. Dad, who had just walked in, overheard the last line and looked defeated. He loved Olivia. He wanted to provide for her. But I knew his finances weren't strong enough to cover a sudden increase in university fees. He'd been struggling to keep up ever since he remarried. New bills, new responsibilities, new expectations. Olivia turned her eyes toward him.
"Dad, please."
"I can't fall behind. I can't look stupid in front of everyone." The guilt on my father's face was enough to crush anyone. That night, while everyone was asleep, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open and stared at Olivia's tuition breakdown. It was expensive. More expensive than it should have been. But I didn't hesitate. I entered my credit card information, hit submit, and paid the entire amount.
Why?
Because I loved my father. Because he had already lost enough. Because I wanted him to feel like he was doing a good job as a parent again. When I woke up the next morning, Brenda was cheerful in a way I had never seen her before. You know, Robert, sometimes blessings just fall into your lap, she said while pouring coffee. Dad nodded, relieved. I'm glad it worked out. I really don't know how. Olivia walked in, smiling. They said the payment came through. I'm all set for classes. She didn't know how it happened.
She didn't ask.
She didn't care. She just cared that she got what she wanted. I didn't say anything. I didn't need the gratitude. I certainly didn't expect it. I had done it for Dad, not for them. But it didn't end there. Every semester, another payment. Every time, another unexpected fee.
Books.
Supplies. Housing contribution. Transportation. Study materials. The bills kept coming, and I kept quietly paying. 2 years passed like this. I paid thousands of dollars for a girl who barely acknowledged my existence. A girl who rolled her eyes at me, mocked my uniform, and made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Dad never asked where the money came from. Brenda never wondered why everything always magically worked out. Olivia never said thank you. I told myself it was okay. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself family meant sacrifice. But deep down, a small part of me wondered, if they ever found out the truth, would they treat me any differently? I didn't know then that the answer was going to break my heart. Christmas had always been my mother's favorite holiday. Even years after she passed, I still felt her presence every time December rolled in. The lights, the music, the warmth. But this particular Christmas felt different from the very beginning. The house was decorated beautifully, yes, but it didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage, and Brenda was the director of a show she desperately wanted the world to applaud. Guests filled every corner of the living room, neighbors, co-workers, extended family, even Olivia's college friends. Everyone was dressed in red and green, holding cups of hot cocoa or wine, laughing as if life had no sharp edges. I stood near the dining table, quietly sipping my drink, trying to stay out of the noise. I had just come back from my base assignment the night before, exhausted but trying to be present for my father. I didn't want drama. I didn't want attention. I just wanted peace. But peace isn't something Olivia ever allowed me to have. She was in the center of the room, telling animated stories, flipping her hair, making everyone laugh. Brenda hovered proudly beside her, as if showcasing her talented prodigy. Every now and then Olivia's glance would slide toward me, sharp, mocking, amused. Like she was waiting for the perfect moment. And then she found it. So, Megan, Olivia suddenly said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, what exactly do you even do for fun? Or do you just stand around like that all the time? The conversations around us quieted. Heads turned. I forced a polite smile. I'm just tired from work, Olivia. She laughed. Not a friendly laugh, but one dripping with cruelty. Oh, right, the army, she said with an exaggerated salute. Such a glamorous life. You know, Megan, you act like being a soldier makes you special or something. A few people shifted awkwardly. I heard my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I never said I was special, I replied calmly. Olivia smirked. Of course not. You don't have much to say ever, do you? Probably, because nothing exciting ever happens in your life. Then she added louder. Honestly, what do you even contribute to this family? You're gone half the time, and when you're here, you just take up space. Brenda placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder as if encouraging her. She's right, Megan, Brenda said sweetly but sharply. You've been living here for free for a long time. Maybe it's time you started thinking about moving out, starting fresh somewhere else. Her words hit me harder than any battlefield explosion I'd ever faced. Guests exchanged startled glances. My father stood frozen, caught between confusion and embarrassment. I felt my chest tighten, my throat burn, my eyes sting, but I refused to cry.
Not in front of them.
Not in front of the people who wanted to see me break. Brenda, I whispered, why would you say that? She shrugged. We're just being honest, dear. You've been depending on us for a while now.
Depending on them.
Depending on them. I felt my knees weaken. These were the people I had been quietly supporting. These were the people I had protected from the truth of their own finances. These were the people whose daughters' entire education I had paid for. Olivia stepped closer, her voice filled with venom. You heard her. You bring nothing to this family. Nothing. The room fell silent. Something inside me cracked open. Not anger, not sadness, but a sharp, piercing realization.
I didn't matter to them.
Not as a daughter. Not as a sister. Not as a human being. Without saying another word, I set my cup down and walked out to the backyard, breathing cold air like it was the only thing keeping me alive. Behind me, laughter slowly resumed, as if my humiliation was nothing more than a momentary entertainment. What no one knew was that the humiliation they gave me that night was going to be the reason everything would soon change. That night, long after the last guest had left and the house had gone quiet, I sat alone in my room with nothing but the faint glow of Christmas lights slipping in through the window. I could still hear Olivia's voice echoing in my ears, sharp, humiliating, deliberate. Every word hit me again, like someone replaying the moment in slow motion just to watch me fall apart. I tried to breathe normally, but the reality of what had happened kept tightening around my chest. I had faced storms in the army, grueling training, sleepless nights, missions where failure wasn't an option. But nothing had ever broken me the way my own family did that night. It wasn't the humiliation in front of strangers that hurt the most. It was the look on my father's face, the hesitation, the silence, the way he didn't stand up for me even once. I sat on the edge of my bed and buried my face in my hands. My uniform hung neatly in the corner, medals shining softly in the dim light. People saluted me.
They respected me.
They trusted me with their lives. Yet here I was, feeling like a burden in the very place that was supposed to be my sanctuary. The tears came suddenly, hot, unstoppable, and heavier than I expected. I cried quietly at first, then harder, until my whole body trembled. I cried for my mother, because she wasn't there to hold me. I cried for my father, because I didn't recognize him anymore. I cried for the years I gave to Brenda and Olivia, for every bill I paid, every sacrifice I made, every smile I forced just to keep peace in a house that never truly wanted me. I thought about the Christmases when Mom would wrap presents with me, humming softly while lights flickered around us. She used to say, "Home is where you're loved, sweetheart." But tonight, this house felt like anything but home. Hours passed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Olivia's smirk, heard Brenda's cold voice telling me I should move out. I kept wondering, how could people who benefited from me so much be so cruel to me? How could they twist the truth so easily? How did I become invisible in my own father's life? At some point, I stood up, walked to the mirror, and stared at my reflection. My eyes were swollen, my breathing uneven, but beneath all that pain, there was a spark. A small, fierce spark that whispered, "Enough." I didn't know what I would do the next day. I didn't know how things would unfold. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Something inside me had shifted forever. I barely slept that night. By the time morning light crept into my room, my eyes were still swollen and my head throbbed from crying. I forced myself out of bed, thinking maybe a glass of water or a quiet moment in the kitchen would help me feel grounded. The house was usually silent at that hour, so I expected to walk into an empty living room. But as I stepped down the hallway, I heard whispers. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But when I got closer, the voices grew clearer. Brenda and Olivia. They were standing near the kitchen island, talking as if the humiliation from last night had meant nothing. Olivia let out a sharp laugh. "Honestly, Mom, Megan is such a freeloader. She acts like she's doing us a favor by staying here." Freeloader. The word sliced through me like a blade. Brenda's voice followed, colder than the morning air. "I know. She should have moved out a long time ago. She's always coming and going with that army schedule, eating our food, living in this house, as if she contributes anything." My heart dropped. Contributes anything? I had paid thousands of dollars for Olivia's education. I had stepped into a responsibility they couldn't handle. I had been the safety net they never thanked, never acknowledged. And now I was being talked about like some parasite draining their life. Olivia scoffed. She's always acting so serious and quiet, like she's better than everyone because she wears a uniform. She paused, then added mockingly, "If she left today, nothing in this house would change." Brenda agreed too quickly. "Exactly.
She's dead weight."
She's just here." My chest tightened painfully. Dead weight. I didn't even know people could say such things about someone who had sacrificed so much for them. I stood there, hidden behind the wall, frozen in a moment I wished I could unhear. For a split second, I thought about confronting them right then and there, but something stopped me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the heartbreak still settling from the night before. Or maybe it was the realization, finally, that these two women had never seen me as family, not even for a moment. Footsteps approached, so I quietly stepped back before they could notice me. I returned to my room and closed the door gently, locking it behind me. The silence inside that room felt heavier than anything I'd carried in uniform. I sat on the bed, hands trembling, trying to breathe past the betrayal. I thought about every payment I made for Olivia, every time I cooked for them, every attempt I made to keep the peace in this house. And now I knew the truth. My sacrifices had meant nothing to them. Nothing. But beneath the heartbreak, something else began to rise. Quiet, firm, unshakable. A decision. I wasn't going to cry this time. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I wasn't going to keep living in a home that didn't want me. That morning, as their cruel words echoed in my mind, something inside me finally hardened. This time, I was done. I don't know how long I sat there in my room after hearing their conversation. Minutes, maybe an hour. Time didn't move normally anymore. But eventually, the shaking in my hands stopped, and my breathing steadied. All the humiliation, all the nights spent crying quietly, all the sacrifices I made without a word, every single burden I had carried for years suddenly aligned into a single, sharp moment of absolute clarity. I stood up. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a soldier again, firm, steady, unafraid. I wasn't going to stay in that room 1 second longer. I wasn't going to shrink myself for people who had twisted my kindness into weakness. I opened the door and walked straight to the living room, where Brenda and Olivia were sitting on the couch, chatting like their words earlier had been harmless small talk. They both looked up when they saw me. Olivia smirked instantly. Wow, she finally came out of her cave. Brenda crossed her arms.
"We were just talking about you."
I hope you're ready to finally discuss moving out. For a moment, I simply stared at them, really stared at them. I wanted to absorb every detail of this moment. The arrogance in Olivia's eyes. The cold confidence in Brenda's posture. The entitlement. The unearned superiority. And for the first time, I wasn't hurt by it. I was done. "I'm leaving," I said quietly but firmly. Olivia blinked, surprised.
"What?"
"Like leaving to go where?" "Away," I replied. "Somewhere that isn't here." Brenda laughed under her breath. "Oh, Megan, stop being dramatic. You'll calm down and forget all this by tomorrow." I shook my head.
"No."
"I won't. Because I finally see what this house has become." Olivia rolled her eyes.
"Please."
"You're acting like we're villains." I took a deep breath. "You want to talk about villains?"
"Fine."
"Let's talk about the truth you don't know." They both froze slightly, sensing a shift in my tone. "For the past 2 years," I said slowly, "every semester, every bill, every fee, Olivia's entire university education, I paid for it."
"Me."
"Not Dad. Not Brenda. Me." Silence. It hit them like a slap. Olivia's face drained of color. What? No, you're lying. You think the money magically appeared?" I asked. "You think your unexpected bills solved themselves? You mocked me, humiliated me, treated me like furniture in this house, while I paid thousands of dollars to keep your education afloat." Brenda stammered. "Why would you even?" "Because I interrupted. I wanted to help Dad. I wanted him to feel like he could still provide for his family. I stepped in quietly because I thought this family mattered. But clearly, I was wrong. Olivia stood up, voice rising. You can't just stop paying. I need those payments. I stared at her blankly. You'll have to manage on your own now. She clenched her fists. You can't do that to me. I can, I said calmly. And I am. Brenda moved closer, trying to put on her old manipulative tone. Megan, sweetheart, think about this. I did think about it, I said firmly. For 2 years. And last night, and this morning, you finally showed me exactly who you are. I owe you nothing now. The room went silent again. I turned and walked toward my bedroom. They followed, pleading, arguing, panicking, but nothing they said mattered anymore. I packed my bag slowly, deliberately, feeling lighter with every item I folded. When I reached the front door, I looked back one last time. This isn't my home anymore, I said softly. And it hasn't been for a long time. And with that, I walked out, closing the door behind me, not as a broken daughter, but as a woman reclaiming her life. The cold air hit my face the moment I stepped outside, but instead of shivering, I felt something loosen inside me, like my lungs were finally taking their first real breath in years. I walked down the driveway with my bag slung over my shoulder, each step feeling strangely powerful, almost unfamiliar. For the first time since my mother died, I wasn't walking towards something. I was walking away. Away from the people who drained me. Away from the home that had turned into a battlefield. Away from the version of myself that kept shrinking to make everyone else comfortable. I didn't have a perfect plan. I didn't have a roadmap. All I had was my car, my bag, my paycheck, and a sudden, overwhelming desire to start over. And somehow that felt enough. I drove around for almost an hour, just letting the road guide me while my thoughts slowly settled. Eventually, I found a small apartment complex not too far from base. Nothing fancy, just a modest building with beige walls, a small courtyard, and a vacancy sign flickering in the window like it had been waiting for me. I parked the car and went inside. The landlord, a kind older woman named Mrs. Green, looked at me with warm eyes. Rough day, she asked softly. I didn't tell her everything. I just nodded. I need a place. As soon as possible. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She simply handed me the paperwork, gave me a tour of a small one-bedroom unit, and said, I think you'll like it here. It's quiet. Quiet. That word felt like medicine. I signed the lease that same hour. The apartment was empty, bare walls, no furniture, no decorations, but somehow it felt more like home than the house I had just left. I dropped my bag in the corner and sat on the carpeted floor, leaning my back against the wall. The silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, comforting, healing. Later that evening, I texted my best friend from the army, Sarah. I moved out today. Sarah, do you need anything? I can come right now. Just talk to me. She called immediately. I told her everything, not with tears this time, but with clarity. She listened quietly, and when I finished, she said, Megan, I'm proud of you. You did the hardest thing a person can do. You chose yourself. That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. Over the next few weeks, I slipped into a routine that wasn't centered around anyone else's needs. I woke up early, cooked breakfast for myself, kept my apartment neat, and threw myself into my army duties with a sharpened focus. I started going to the gym more, spent evenings journaling, and on weekends, I walked around local parks, reminding myself what peace felt like. Slowly, the heaviness I carried for years began to fade. My mind felt clearer, my heart lighter. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't living for someone else's comfort, approval, or expectations. I was living for me, and with every passing day, that choice felt less like a leap and more like freedom. It had been months since I left that house, months of silence, months of peace, months of finally learning who I was without the weight of someone else's cruelty pressing on my chest. My apartment slowly filled with small signs of a new life, a coffee mug I actually liked, a plant Sarah insisted I buy, photos from base pinned to my fridge. I felt stable again. Grounded.
Strong.
One quiet evening, just as I was finishing dinner, my phone buzzed. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen in a long time, Olivia. For a moment, I simply stared at it. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I didn't feel that familiar heaviness anymore. I just felt detached.
Calm.
Like I was looking at a chapter of my life I had already closed. Still, I answered. There was silence on the other end. Then a shaky breath. Megan. Her voice sounded smaller, thinner. Yes, I replied. She sniffed, clearly crying. I didn't know who else to call. Another pause, then a sob. I'm sorry. For everything. The words hung in the air between us. Months ago, hearing her say that would have cracked me open. But now, they felt like echoes reaching a place I no longer lived in. I was horrible to you, she continued. I said things I shouldn't have. Mom did too. And when the payment stopped, I realized how much you'd been doing. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I closed my eyes, listening. Not hurting, just watching the truth finally catch up to her. Megan, please can you forgive me? She whispered. I need you. I don't know how to handle things without your help. Her words revealed everything. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about regret.
It was about need.
About consequences finally landing where they should have long ago. I took a slow breath. Olivia, I said gently, I'm glad you realized what happened.
Truly.
And one day, maybe I will forgive you. But I can't do that today. She cried harder. But why? Because healing doesn't happen overnight, I answered. And because I finally built a life where I'm not treated like I'm invisible. There was silence, heavy, honest silence. I hope you find your way, I said softly. But I can't carry you anymore. And for the first time in years, I hung up the phone without feeling guilty. After Olivia's call ended, I sat quietly on my couch, letting the silence settle around me like a soft blanket. The city lights peeked through my window, flickering gently against the walls of my small apartment. For years, I had dreamed of peace, of a life where I wasn't constantly shrinking myself, apologizing for existing, or carrying responsibilities no one ever acknowledged. And now, here I was, living that peace. I leaned back and let out a long breath, one I felt like I had been holding my entire life. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. I didn't feel torn between duty and dignity. I didn't feel like the unwanted piece in someone else's perfect picture. I felt whole. I felt steady. I felt like Megan, not the soldier, not the stepdaughter, not the caretaker. Just Megan. In the weeks that followed, I continued building my life piece by piece. I decorated my apartment with colors I loved. I treated myself to things I had always put off. I took weekend trips, laughed more with Sarah, and even started therapy to unpack the years of emotional weight I had carried alone. Every session, every conversation, every small accomplishment made me realize how deeply I had buried my own worth just to keep others comfortable. One evening, while journaling, a thought came to me, simple but powerful. Sometimes the family you're born into teaches you who not to become. I closed my notebook and whispered those words aloud. They didn't hurt. They didn't sting. They felt freeing. I knew one day Olivia might change. One day Brenda might understand. One day my father might see the truth. But none of that controlled me anymore. Their growth, their regrets, their consequences, those belonged to them.
Not to me.
My life was finally mine. If there's one thing my journey taught me, it's this. Strength isn't always about standing tall in uniform. Sometimes, it's about walking away from the people who refuse to see your worth. I don't know what the future holds. But I know this. I will never again dim my light for people who chose to live in the dark. And for the first time in many, many years, that truth feels like home. Thank you for listening to my story today. If this journey touched your heart or made you reflect on your own strength, I would truly appreciate it if you could like this video, Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this. Your support helps these powerful voices reach people who need them the most. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.